Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. We have a lot of great content to go over with you today. By way of background, Hyland worked with Frost Sullivan, an industry research firm, to do a survey of industry usage and adoption of RPA across departments and verticals. And so we have some really interesting findings to share with you today. Before we jump into that presentation, I just wanted to let everyone know that if you signed up for this webinar, you will actually get a copy of the Frost & Sullivan white paper. So you'll get a link via email to this screen where you can go to download the results. So I just wanted to show you this so you know what to expect. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and play my screen. One sec. All right. So the top level finding by Frost & Sullivan is that RPA implementation is tied to company success and profitability. We will talk about why that is over the course of the next few minutes. I am going to be moving pretty quick through this material because there's a lot to cover. So please do save your questions for the end. I will be checking the chat once we wrap up here to open it up for discussion. So with that, here's a brief overview of the presentation today. So the first thing we'll start with is just talk about why RPA in general. You know, why is this something that companies are looking into now? Why is the market for RPA exploding? And then we'll talk a little bit about what exactly RPA is. Once we've kind of covered the basics, we'll jump into the key takeaways of the Frost & Sullivan RPA usage and intensity survey. And then we'll do a deeper dive into RPA usage by department and industry. And then finally, we will wrap up with RPA adoption drivers, including some challenges and obstacles to implementation and vendor best practices. So with that, why RPA? Well, in a nutshell, the value proposition of RPA is do more with less. And this is the value proposition for automation more broadly, and especially intelligent automation. Where RPA is unique is that it enables you to create automation where previously you had to have a human being actually doing things. And we'll talk more about that in a moment. It is no secret by now that COVID-19 has permanently shifted the way organizations work. Companies are increasingly operating in remote environments with less staff to run key processes. You know, the benefits are avoid simple clerical errors. So you have people, you know, entering data over and over and over again. The opportunities for error in the entry of that data increase, and those often carry with them big regulatory penalties. The tedious stuff gets done faster. Your staff does not want to spend the best hours of their day every day doing tedious, repetitive chores. So this also enables you to connect multiple systems without building new APIs. And we'll talk about that in a moment. Basically, you know, whereas before you had to have an automation solution that was natively plugged into one particular software application or system, RPA is kind of a bridge that can move between systems and pull data from one system to another. This frees up your knowledge workers' time for more valuable tasks. So, you know, everyone wants to look forward to going to work in the morning every day. This is possible if they feel that they can use their minds, creativity, connect with others, spending less time doing the kind of rote manual tasks. And then finally, RPA does allow you to augment your staff without needing to hire either temporary workers or additional FTEs, which is really important for organizations facing budgetary constraints. So what does this all really add up to? First of all, scale. You need to grow, and you need to be able to grow rapidly by automating processes that are rote and repetitive. And then, of course, profit. The reality is that nobody's automating without an eye toward the bottom line. And so if your automation solution isn't impacting your bottom line, maybe think about areas where that could be improved. So these are some really high-level takeaways from the Frost and Sullivan survey. Once an organization reaches 10 million in annual revenue, the likelihood that it uses RPA intensely, meaning in 7 or more departments, doubles. And 10 million in annual revenue is also kind of the threshold between SMB and SME. So as companies are moving from small business to mid-market, they find that their automation needs escalate rapidly, hence the increased deployment of RPA. And then, as we said, it does impact bottom line. So organizations with intense RPA usage declare an annual profit growth 4 times higher than companies not using RPA. That's 16% versus 4%. Now, it's hard to establish direct causation there, but that is a significant correlation that may have to do with RPA as well as with other automation solutions those companies are using, because as we'll see, implementing RPA typically doesn't happen standalone. Typically, it is part of a broader automation package, and the efficiencies gained at that kind of scale do add up. So, then there's kind of the human dimension of using RPA. So things your staff might think, like, I'm so glad I'm not manually validating data from customer order forms right now. I am having a conversation with another human. I'm thinking through things. I'm not spending 4 hours a night on total capital ratio reports for bank regulators. And that's an actual case study we have here with Hyland RPA, where we were able to save bank executives on, between 1 to 4 hours a night on this daily report preparation. And then in retail, we can literally deploy an army of virtual assistants to draft financial statements, to enter and approve orders, to issue invoices, to process payments, to reconcile. The AP and AR implications or applications of RPA are endless. So in a nutshell, the benefits of RPA are increased efficiency and accuracy. And from that top level bold benefit, all of the other benefits derive. So that includes improved employee satisfaction and experience, intelligent automation, improved information security, compliance, and disaster recovery, because you have bots managing your information and not humans, improved audit trails and process improvements, simplified deployment, and reduced reliance on IT, and of course, accelerated ROI. So most organizations expect to and do realize ROI from RPA implementations between 6 to 12 months, which is really fast. And that makes sense because the entire value prop is efficiency and accuracy. So if it's not turning around ROI quickly, it's not doing what it was designed to do. So what is RPA? It is low-code, no-code software. So there is a configuration process, but it's not a cumbersome built-from-scratch solution. This is technology for developing software robots to automate business processes. It's applicable in all business areas and across applications. So, you can think of RPA as kind of a Swiss Army knife. It can do pretty much anything. And this is why having really clearly defined use cases for what you want it to do is going to be where you realize the fastest value. And it runs on a Windows desktop. So it's super simple. You can have actually attended or unattended RPA. So if you still need to have a human in the loop for part of the process, you can have that human supervising the bot, or if it's just a lights out process, you can have the bots running without any human intervention at all. So what is RPA not? It's not a walking, talking physical robot. It's not an employee that edits documents. It's not an intelligent voice-controlled assistant like Siri, Cortana, or Google. And it is not the same thing as back-end automation. So it, in fact, can complement any one of these things. So to put it a little differently, you can imagine that RPA fills process gaps that are currently filled manually. So maybe you have a workflow automation solution, but you still need someone to at some point log in and copy and paste data from one system into another, or maybe log into a website to verify information, validate that information, copy it from that gated login back into your database. So those are the kinds of processes that RPA can replace. It extends the life of your legacy systems, so you don't have to revise your current technology investments. In fact, RPA can help you maximize their value. It moves human roles to a higher value plane, like we were talking about. This results in more fulfilled workers. It also results in better morale across the organization. It ensures accuracy and quality in repetitive business processes. Robots never get tired. They rarely make mistakes. They copy data exactly. So it improves compliance. It enables rapid scalability, and of course, boosts profit margins through efficiencies. So here are just some examples of like the actual tasks that RPA is doing for you. It's opening mail attachments. It's logging into web or other software applications. It's moving files and folders around. It can back up folders and manage that through FTP, for example. It can copy and paste data, fill in forms, execute if-then decisions. It can search the internet for data and collect that, move it into your systems. It can connect to existing interfaces like APIs. It can perform calculations, filter structured data from documents, and collect social media statistics. And you can see all the different application logos down at the bottom because RPA takes a task-based approach rather than a software-based approach. So in the past, you used to have to build your automation solutions directly into a software application or system. Now with RPA, you have the task performed by the bot that can be performed in any software application. And from a Hyland standpoint, that means it doesn't matter if you're an on-base customer, Perceptive content service that we provide is compatible with RPA. So that was just a little bit of background, what RPA is, why it's valuable. Now let's jump into the Frost Sullivan RPA usage and intensity survey. So the objectives of this study were really fourfold. We wanted to identify the degree of process automation and RPA implementation among organizations from target industry verticals and regions. We wanted to determine interest in the future adoption of RPA, describe how RPA fits into an organization's broader automation strategy, and then understand choice criteria, benefits, and barriers associated with RPA implementation. For methodology, this was an online survey conducted between December of 2020 and January of this year of respondents who are decision makers with software purchasing power. We restricted it to organizations with 100 or more employees and to people who are familiar with the concept of RPA. So they had at least heard of it, even if they've never actually implemented it yet. So we got a little over 400 people in the sample. 184 of them were IT decision makers, 222 were line of business decision makers, and then we also had quotas by industry and region. So we got a pretty good sampling from around the world and across industries. Key findings. So these are, top level results. On the implementation side, 77% of organizations who have heard of RPA have implemented it in at least one process. So that suggests that the value is pretty clear. Once you learn about RPA, it's really only a matter of time before you bring it in at least one department in your organization. The highest levels of deployment are in IT, in records management, and finance and accounting. And we'll talk about those use cases in a little more detail soon. In terms of usage patterns, medium and large commercial companies are the most intensive RPA users, and then regionally, APAC organizations declare the highest intensity across all regions. So that makes sense. I mean, the larger your company gets, the more scale and scalability become, pressing issues, particularly from a cash flow management standpoint. And so making sure that you have automation solutions in place, to help do things like, implement a new ERP system, automate AP and AR processes, automate parts of the contracting process, automate aspects of customer service. These become increasingly critical to both employee satisfaction, but also customer satisfaction. In terms of growth potential, the majority of organizations we surveyed do plan further implementation of RPA. So once you start, it's hard to stop. That's the Swiss Army knife approach is, if you start by implementing RPA, in your contracting process, then, maybe you start imagining ways to use it for new customer onboarding or, for invoice processing. The importance of RPA, it's seen as pretty critical for organizations' automation strategy. So when building out an automation strategy, most organizations have RPA as at least some component of that strategy. And of course, the declared profit growth 4 times higher than companies not using RPA is a major reason for that. So in terms of choice criteria, benefits, and barriers, companies are really looking for usability, existing integration, so ability to integrate with existing software, and then agility of the solution. Those are really the top selection criteria. The strongest perceived benefit, again, increased speed and efficiency. That's super clear. In terms of challenges and obstacles to adoption, most organizations would list cost. Again, you're doing this to realize ROI, so the cost of the underlying solution is a really important component of that. Then, what to do with unstructured content. And that's a broader, question for automation enterprise in general. The good news is that RPA pairs really well with solutions in intelligent capture that help you extract structured data from unstructured data. So it again complements and forms part of a holistic automation approach. Data security and regulatory compliance. The bots need access to your systems. How do we make sure that they have the right user permissions and that they're doing exactly what is prescribed and nothing more? That's something that any solid RPA vendor has real answers and proof points for. So those are kind of the main barriers perceived by our survey group. So let's dive in now and take a closer look at RPA usage by department and industry. And we'll start with department and actually start by zooming out a little bit to talk about automation in general. So the shares of departments with different degrees of automation break down pretty starkly. IT is at the top with almost 60% of IT departments in the companies we interviewed having 75% or more of their processes automated. So that's kind of a big deal. And we often do find that, IT is the first department to actually reach out to us to learn about RPA, and only later do line of business decision makers come into the conversation. But as you can see, they're just as critical. So, records management, that's a very broad category, and it could span across multiple departments. But finance and accounting is typically the first line of business department to automate. Customer communications, HR, these are also at the forefront of adoption. So from the survey pool, we found that almost 80% of organizations have implemented RPA in at least one department. And again, this is, keeping in mind that we restricted our survey to only those decision makers who had at least heard of RPA, but that's still pretty high. Starting with IT, records management, finance, and accounting, and then HR. So that there's also, RPA implementation doesn't happen one and done across the entire organization. Generally, one department will lead, and then other departments will follow. And so the typical RPA implementation journey looks something like this, where you might start with IT, then move to HR, finance and accounting, then case management, records management, manufacturing and warehousing, customer communications and sales, and then finally R&D and vendor and legal contracts. So, one of the suspected reasons that the steps 4, 5, and 6 are later in the process is that they may have more unstructured content to manage, or more data security and regulatory compliance concerns. So, you can see again, out of that 77% who have implemented RPA, you have most of them either at moderate or intense usage. So moderate is 4 to 6 departments with RPA, and then intense usage has 7 or more departments with RPA. And then looking at this by region and industry, again, you can see that APAC has the highest level of high intensity usage, but overall the region with the highest level of usage is Latin America. And then on the industry side, commercial, again, has the highest levels of both total usage and intense usage of RPA. So, diving down a little to look at the department level implementations, you can see that the ones with the intense RPA usage still plan to implement additional projects within the next 24 months. So IT, records management, finance and accounting coming out on top, and the long tail of adoption behind them. Okay, so let's take a look at what processes are actually being automated by IT. Probably the most popular process to automate is FTP download, upload, and backup, followed by file management, synchronizing, deleting, and emptying folders, installations, batch processing, any email-related tasks that involve opening emails, downloading attachments, sending those attachments elsewhere, ticket processing, server and application modeling, asset management, and others. So this is not an exhaustive list. This is just the list that was proposed by Frost and Sullivan to the survey takers. There are many other applications for RPA in IT. So if you have an idea or if you're writing a script for it, chances are that you can have bots do it. In finance and accounting, the use cases for RPA are many. The procure to pay kind of umbrella use case has many micro use cases under that that are used. Record to report, vendor management, collections, incentive claims, and order to cash. Within HR, employee onboarding is perhaps the most popular use case, which makes sense. I mean, it's cumbersome. It involves a lot of paperwork across multiple systems, multiple parties. It's followed closely by payroll, time and attendance management, human records, HR records processing, extracting data from candidate CVs, benefits administration, employee training and education, W-4 management, stock administration, compliance reporting, and other. So again, you can kind of extrapolate from this, like anytime you need to onboard anyone. Maybe it's a new user to one of your IT systems. Maybe it's a new patient in healthcare. Maybe it's a student in higher education. Onboarding and offboarding in general is a great use case for RPA. In financial services, so financial institutions declare the highest RPA adoption in customer onboarding, again, IT, compliance reporting, and records management. It makes sense. KYC AML, human resources management, account closure, case management, loan processing, external communications, virtually anything. And we saw that of the survey sample, 90% of organizations in financial services have implemented RPA in at least one process. So if we break that down a little further and look at insurance, again, IT and information services was the top use case, but claims processing followed closely, and then external communications and case management. This was a little lower of a sample base, only 17 of our respondents, but we think it's still directionally interesting. On the commercial side, so commercial for the purposes of this survey included energy and utility companies, manufacturing, retail, wholesale, O&G, transportation, and telecom. Again, IT was the main department where we see RPA implementations, followed closely by HR and records management, and then customer service. On the healthcare side, yeah, we have over 3/4 of healthcare organizations in our sample having implemented at least one RPA process, starting with IT, followed by claims processing, inventory management, patient billing, HR management, and report capture. In government, online form processing was the top use case, which makes sense. That's kind of the vanguard of citizen services. We have 65% of government organizations in the sample having implemented at least one RPA process, but that's still pretty high. And again, it spans across all of the back office processes within government agencies. In higher ed, also leading with IT, followed closely by faculty and staff services, human resource management, records management, and then resources management and scheduling, and admissions and enrollment management. Almost 3/4 of higher ed institutions in this sample have implemented RPA in at least one process. So that was a quick overview by department and industry. Let's talk a little bit about adoption drivers. So the main business goals supported by RPA, according to the sample, are digital transformation, first and foremost, business efficiency, and innovation. And what's interesting is that we saw that among organizations who had not implemented RPA yet, it was really digital transformation and business efficiency is what they perceived as the value. But for those organizations who have implemented RPA, they really saw its value as part of a broader innovation strategy. In other words, it made the entire organization function better, and so it created more bandwidth for innovation. The vast majority see RPA as either one of the most strategically critical automation capabilities or as a useful capability along with or as an extension of other automation technologies and solutions. Again, yeah, number one benefit, increased process speed and efficiency, but improved data quality was a big one too. Which makes sense. I mean, data hygiene is increasingly critical, not just for regulatory compliance reasons, but to understand the business, especially as AI tools become more sophisticated. Garbage in, garbage out. So anything you can do to improve that data quality and help with data hygiene becomes a driver of the business. And then improved customer service and experience. I mean, how much time and heartache could you save if the simple clerical errors that result in a bad customer experience could simply be eliminated? So again, yeah, here's where we see, based on how intensely an organization is using RPA, what they perceive the benefits to be. So you can see it's really lopsided for the organizations that don't use it at all. They really kind of see it as increased process speed and efficiency, and also improved customer service and experience. But then the more intensely organizations use RPA, the more benefits they perceive, from improved data quality to reduction of manual errors, reduced costs of and reliance on IT to perform routine tasks or system integrations, improved business results, reduced human contact with sensitive data, increased scope for data collection, reduced wage costs, and reduced fraud and employee churn. So this is just a breakout of that correlation that we talked about earlier, declared profit growth by RPA usage intensity. 4% profit growth at no usage and 16% growth with intense usage. Okay, so some of the obstacles, we briefly talked about this earlier, but cost is of course a major consideration. Again, the primary benefits of RPA are increased efficiency and ultimately cost savings. So demonstrating that ROI is really critical, followed by challenges with automating processes with unstructured content, documents, and communications. This is really where your content services solutions make or break the project. Like if you have implemented a solution, for example, for extracting structured data from unstructured data, you're going to have a lot more success with your RPA implementation. Data security and regulatory compliance concerns. Again, have your vendor walk you through how they have, structured the product to comply with GDPR. Where do you, as the implementer, the designer and implementer of the solution, need to be aware of your regulatory obligations around how that data is managed and how those bots access and interact with that data. That's all part of the solution design process. And then, yeah, I mean, making sure that it can speak across systems and applications. This is actually what RPA was designed to do, but making sure that you're specific enough in your use case design that you're touching on all the systems the bots need access to will help surface if there are any integration issues. So, the perceived obstacles are the relatively constant based on intensity of RPA usage. Although, for those who are using it intensely, perceiving cost as a barrier goes down, probably because you're achieving economies of scale the more you're using RPA. And then the data security and regulatory compliance concerns go up with greater usage, which makes sense. I mean, you need to make sure you're keeping an audit trail of all the activity of these bots, you're understanding the architecture of the solution, the process map of the automation processes that are at work. So that's something you'll continue to keep tabs on. On the expected role of IT. So it makes sense here that there's a difference between how IT respondents answer this question and business respondents. There's a pretty broad consensus that IT needs to support and consult on any RPA implementation in an organization. IT does tend to view themselves as the owners of the solution more than do business respondents, but ultimately IT is always going to have some role and some say in the shape this implementation takes. And then the most attractive value add capabilities. Okay, so if I'm imagining RPA as part of a comprehensive intelligent automation strategy for my business, what are some of the other capabilities that I'll need to realize the greatest value from that implementation? So the top mentioned capability is workflow automation, which makes sense. Followed closely by intelligent capture. And again, that addresses the unstructured to structured data transformation that's necessary for RPA to be able to work with that content. So workflow automation, intelligent capture, and then deep integration with enterprise applications. If you're leveraging RPA, you really need them to be able to do most of what a human user could do. And that means they have to be able to access whatever they need to get the task done. Okay, and then vendor selection criteria. As we mentioned earlier, the top three most important categories are actually flexibility. So ability to deploy the solution across different areas of the business, usability, and then robust integrations and agility. If we look at just the ones that were ranked top three as most crucial, usability, robust integrations, and agility, right there at the top. So again, these are the things that RPA solutions were designed to be. And so when you're comparing vendors, it may be worth actually creating a process map of the specific use cases you want to automate, and then collecting different proposals for how different vendors would address those use cases and what the cost models are. Because one of the things that is very clear in the RPA market is that there's no one single pricing model. Some vendors price based on usage volume or tasks, some price per bot on an annual rate. So in order to get a sense for price comparison or cost comparison, the more specific your use case can be, the more information your vendors can provide you. So in terms of preferred type of vendor, most of the organizations we surveyed prefer to go with a specialized RPA system integrator, and others, preferred about equal rates a generic RPA vendor or an existing solution provider who is adding RPA capabilities to a solution you're already licensing. Any of these three approaches, candidly, are fine. At Hyland, we take more of the point of view that we're a content services provider that has an intelligent automation suite of capabilities, and so we would deploy RPA in combination with an on-base workflow implementation or alfresco process automation implementation or perceptive content, and then design that solution together with you so that it encompasses the full end-to-end automation process.